Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to say this is a work in progress. It's the general topic I've been working on for a long time, but I've been only the sort of last several months have I been really kind of tweaking it and pushing it into a new shape to, as Ryan said, become an exhibition, hopefully at the St. Louis Art Museum and a couple of other venues, maybe in about 2015, which is sort of the time it takes to plan an exhibition and get all of the loans in and all of that. So that gives you a sense of museum life as well. So 17th century Dutch art has long been celebrated for its contributions to the development of landscape, genre, and still life. Travelers remarked on the profusion of art in virtually every Dutch household, which suggests that the marketplace was one agent in this change. Geography was also important, excuse me, as were religion and politics, since the Dutch Republic was in formation in the early decades of the 17th century. What I would like to do today is to begin to frame an argument about the ways in which early 17th century Dutch artists contributed to the definition of the young Dutch Republic. They did this in part by setting their eyes on the flat local landscape, the merrymaking of their contemporaries, and the practical and decorative accoutrements of their households. This is an exhibition that I'm proposing for the St. Louis Art Museum, and what I plan to do with this presentation today is to give you an idea of the overall shape that I hope the exhibition will take, but I also want to slow down a bit to discuss what I think is one of the, or two of the more distinctive and interesting parts of the exhibition, which I'm really just embarking on the research for. The exhibition will focus on artists active in the Dutch city of Haarlem, spelled with two A's, as you can see, who were among the leading innovators of the newly developing genres of landscape, genre, and still life. And the aim is to capture a very particular and generative moment in the history of 17th century Dutch art between the years of about 1610 and 1630. 1612 was the year that three remarkable young artists, Hercules Segers, Willem Boutewijk, and Esaias van der Velde, joined the city's Painters Guild. I show you an example of a work by each of these artists. At that point, in 1612, Haarlem already held a distinguished place in the history of Dutch art. But those three artists, along with Frans and Dirk Hals, Pieter Melijn, Jan van Goyen, Jan van der Velde, and Peter Klaas, were among the first to specialize in the startling new subjects that were reflected in their very particular time and place, and that came to be considered the typical genres of Dutch art. So High Life and Low Pastures will sketch out the artistic, intellectual, political, religious, and geographical sources for the role that Haarlem played in the development of 17th century genres. I don't want to suggest that Haarlem was the only place where landscapes and genre pictures were made, or that these modes of depicting sprang full-fledged and all at once out of the Haarlem Lake, or Haarlemmermeer, which in the early 17th century still spread out between Haarlem and Amsterdam, but rather that the 1610s and 1620s, artists in Haarlem, indeed in some way the city itself, played a distinctive and pivotal role in the development of these modes of depiction. That during their stays in Haarlem, the city's history, artistic tradition, topography, and culture all played strategic roles in the development of their art. I want to highlight origins, the original moment, but also transition. The transition from, for example, the 16th century Flemish allegorical print series that rendered classical allegories in increasingly naturalistic surroundings, to 17th century Dutch landscape series that took the form of a walk in the countryside. The three artists whose work is on the screen are pivotal. The short career of Willem Pieters Boutewijk, the Merry Company at the top left, was over by 1624. However, his inventive and bold depictions of well-heeled Dutch youth at play and equally forthright compositions of the local Haarlem landscape are among the first of their kind. Hercules Segers, the two trees at the top right, was a native of Haarlem who was remembered for a small number of extraordinary paintings and mostly unique prints depicting fantastic and local landscapes. Although he disappears from this story even more quickly, his tiny body of work is remarkable for its experimental quality. Esaias van der Velde, the black chalk drawing on the bottom, was the Amsterdam-born son of an Antwerp immigrant painter whose earliest works show the influence of what I call the Flemish deep forest school of landscape painting, but whose graphic etchings and drawings of the Haarlem landscape set the stage for the next generation. Start with landscape. This is Hercules Segers. I showed you his two trees in the earlier on, and here also is a landscape with oak tree, which is printed on cloth. So Hercules was one of those three artists whose presence helped create the Haarlem moment in the 1610s, and while he's a critical figure for the developments in printmaking. Rembrandt owned and reworked one of his printing plates. His work is unique and idiosyncratic, and frankly, way before his time. You saw in my first slide the amazing two trees, which dates to the 1620s. This etching is from 1615, an etching printed on linen. Sager's paintings were extremely rare, and his etchings, in complete contradiction to the replicative purpose of the medium, are unique or exist in no more than a handful of impressions. Despite this, it is clear that works such as these are part and parcel of the new art that was developing in the 1610s. In the 1620s, Jan van Goyen, Pieter Melijn, and others, many of whom studied with Isaias, began to develop a mode of tonal painting that increased the speed with which they could paint and therefore enabled a higher output, as has been argued by Michael Montius in an economic model. But it also created a very specific and successful aesthetic that, as paintings conservator Melanie Gifford has argued, draws upon the drawings and prints with which this particular form of landscape was begun. Van Goyen could produce a painting in a day or two, and he really painted mostly directly on the panel with very little underdrawing. He was a prolific draftsman, but he did not use his drawings as direct models for the paintings. Rather, he drew on details from his sketchbooks as he painted. You could say that his drawings functioned more as source material. They fed his eye and hand, so that when he went into the studio to paint, he had a full store of landscape motifs to draw from and a good sense of how to combine them. This is one of the paintings from the mid-1640s, and also one of his chalk drawings, which is very similar to the same kind of landscape chalk drawings that Isaias was doing at about the same time. Frans Hals is the most universally recognizable name in the group. He joined the guild 2 years before Isaias, Buitenweg, and Segers in 1610. He didn't make any landscapes. Drawings do not survive, and the contemporary prints after his work are formal engravings after portraits. He made just a handful of what we would call genre paintings, works from the teens and 20s that form a small core group of merry reveler paintings in his characteristically free painting style. These are significant for both contemporary and later developments. The subject of this painting, his Shrovetide, or Lenten Festival of 1615, is a traditional one. Indeed, it is a Catholic one of the party before the Lenten Fest. But that actually makes my point about such transitional works. You might think, okay, it's the Protestant provinces of the Netherlands. Why is there a Catholic thing? But the boundaries were definitely not so strict. And I think this makes my point too about transitional works, which are very much on the cusp between the old and the new, still retaining visible signs of their traditional associations. Which leads me to the last section in the exhibition on still life, which I'll mainly gloss over here. I just want to say that although one mostly hears about early Vanitas paintings being the precedent for still life paintings, it seems to me that prints like this etching by Jan van der Velde on the left seem to me also to provide an interesting point of entry into the development of still life, since the objects in the image are all, in fact, the content of a classic early Haarlem still life, such as those by Peter Klaas. And I show you one from a little bit later from the 1640s here that's also in St. Louis Art Museum's collection. I'd like to synthesize the story and to highlight the interrelationship between drawings, prints, and paintings. For example, the argument that Isaias van der Velde transferred the economy of means that he developed in his drawings and prints into his painting, and that he and painters who worked with him, such as Pieter Melijn and Jan van Goyen, came up with a trademark economy of means to depict their natural surroundings. The landscape print series are crucial to my story, and they're also widely acknowledged, but the parallel costume and genre prints have been all but ignored. My goal is to bring together a series of thematic threads that converged in Haarlem in the early decades of the 17th century, the depictions of the local, including landscape costumes, celebration and criticism of newfound freedoms and wealth, and austere and extravagant assemblages of foods and objects to describe and investigate afresh the moment that stands at the origin of the Dutch Golden Age. Thank you.